a response to the political cartoons?
So here we go. So today you got a quiz. Tomorrow you got a discussion board. Wednesday you've got the replies to the discussion board. Thursday you've got a quiz. Friday you got a discussion board. Monday the 5th you should have the replies to the discussion board. The 6th you have a quiz. The 7th you have a discussion board. The 8th you have the replies to the discussion board. And then Friday the 9th is your next test.
Okay, that's the test isn't in D2O.
What?
The test isn't in D2O. It goes 6, 7, 8, and then it skips to the 12 for the calendar.
Okay, I will. Let me make a note.
Like it's probably in D2L, but it's not like an assignment for like it doesn't say it in the calendar.
Okay. I wonder if that's because it's not available until the day of the test. Have the other tests shown up? Have they? Okay.
Yeah, they've always shown up, and then this one is just it goes 6, 8, and then
it might be that I made the test and I might just not have put it in the content module. So that could be. All right, guys. So let's go through media. We should actually probably talk about net neutrality first, just because this is something that was in the news a couple of years ago, and you need to understand what it is. Y'all know what net neutrality means? Okay. So here's one of the issues about media in general. So you understand, media is corporations, yes? Like you understand that Fox is a corporation, it's a company. Diego, do you get that?
I got it all good.
Okay. So what is their primary purpose?
To get money. You know.
So you disagree? What do you think their primary purpose is?
I don't know. They don't really have a primary purpose.
Who doesn't have a primary purpose?
They just do stuff that.
Who is?
It's just, I don't know.
You don't even know who we're talking about, do you? Their primary purpose is to make money. They're a company. Company's primary purpose is to turn a profit. If they don't turn a profit, they cease to be a company, they go out of business. Okay? But there is a question with media as to whether or not media is something that should be more heavily regulated by the national government because media is essential to the welfare of the nation. Right? You need, I'm telling you right now, like we claim to live in a democracy. We know by this point, like we don't live in a democracy, right? But we talked about this with campaigns and voting and your political ideologies and behaviors. Like, what is the number one thing that I need from you as you become adults in our political system? No. Caleb, I would like you to vote if you've done something else first. Be educated. I need you to cast an educated vote, not an ignorant vote. Like if you choose to be ignorant, and ignorance is a choice. If that's your choice, and that's fine, right? But I need you to be one of the people that doesn't vote then. Because I don't need you to be casting ignorant votes. Okay? Because for the welfare of a nation like this, for a democracy or democratic republic to function, you have to have a well-informed electorate. The only way we have a well-informed electorate is if we have access to knowledge or to the news. Net neutrality is the idea of basically taking the internet and making it a public commodity so that private companies can't manipulate it. Okay? Because if we allowed private companies to manipulate it, ultimately what we could end up with is a situation where you would pay for internet the same way that you pay for cable. Right? And do y'all understand how that actually works? Like with cable, you have packages, right? And so, like, Kaylee, how many channels y'all get at the house? Do you know?
I don't have cable.
Y'all don't have cable at all?
I think we have it like 1
Okay, but you know how many channels they get?
It's like 1,000.
Diego, you get 1,000 at your house?
Like actual channel. Yeah, it's like 1,000.
How many do you actually watch?
2.
Right. Like, but then that's common. That's common in America. Like, we have to buy these cable packages that are ridiculous, but then you don't ultimately end up watching any of those. If the internet was treated the same way as cable was, you could end up in a situation where you buy internet and it's like, hey, you can get Twitter but no TikTok, right? Or you can get Snapchat but no TikTok, right? Or if you want to pay more, we'll give you Snapchat and TikTok.
That's so dumb. Like if I'm being honest, if I'm being honest, if I'm being completely honest, I barely use cable. I just watch Netflix on the PS4.
Right, but here's the thing.
Yeah.
Part of the reason why we actually like watch cable less and less, and why cable is less and less significant, is because of the rise of the internet, but also because cable engaged in a variety of behaviors and practices that made us look at it and be like, this is not worth it.
Yeah.
Like why do I pay for the Lifetime movie network? I'm not watching that garbage ever. Under any circumstance, for the love of Jesus, I would rather have a frontal lobotomy. Right? Like there's all kinds of channels that I pay for that are pointless, but you pay for them in order, because I have to have the ACC network. Like I have to. My life is incomplete without the ACC network, because I need to be able to watch Carolina basketball. It's literally like my family, my God, and then Carolina basketball. Like that's the order things go in my life. So net neutrality is the idea of how sort of involved is the government going to be in protecting sort of our access to media and our ability to get all variety of media so that we can be well informed. The media is all encompassing, so I need you to understand when we talk media, when we say media, we're talking about everything. We're talking about that stuff that is printed, that stuff that is broadcast, like social media now falls into media. So anything that essentially can provide you with any sort of information or news, right? Like the reality is that Diego back there tweets out that he had a Coke Zero after the football game to celebrate, right? Like that's news. Nobody cares about that news, but it's still news, okay? Which is part of what makes social media media. Again, we just talked about this. It's essential democracy. It's essential. It's essential because you have to be well informed, okay? And so I'm going to tell you this because here's the problem. Like media has now gotten to the point, in part with the internet, where there's so much access, there's so much opportunity for media to exist, that for the love of God, y'all need to start looking at and trying to figure out what is and is not actually like real. Okay? Like some of the stuff that you read online, not real. You also need to understand that the media is important enough, it's essential enough that it is listed in the First Amendment, right? Freedom of speech, freedom of press. Okay? The media needs to be able to have freedom in order to provide you with information. Journalists, those are the people that work in the media. They're the ones that are doing the actual reporting. They seek to provide you with information that is verified and accurate. There is sort of a there's sort of an ethical aspect to journalism in which journalists should be providing ethical, factual information. But you need to understand now that there is a difference between like journalists and political commentators. Political commentators have no intention of telling you things that are factual. They're telling you opinion-based things. Okay? And so you need to understand that difference. Again, media operates for profit. It's owned by relatively small organizations now, right? So we basically have media conglomerates. Do you two need to be separated like you're in 5th grade?
She's not even working. Only you
do. There's predominantly media conglomerates now. In fact, the vast majority of media is owned or controlled by I think 5 different companies, right? So when you take all media, like all newspapers, all magazines, all broadcast television, like 5 companies owns all of it. And if you don't believe that, just think about like the NCAA basketball tournament, right? So CBS has the rights to the NCAA basketball tournament, but what you'll find is that the first round is also on TNT and TBS and True TV, because those are all like owned by the same company, right? The Olympics is the same way. NBC has the right to the Olympics, but you'll see Olympic coverage on like the USA Network, because USA is actually a part of NBC. Again, so that's media monopolies. That's what we have now. They are probably somewhat concerning, just because monopolies in general are somewhat concerning. But I would argue that infotainment is probably more of a concern than the monopoly aspect. People now look for sort of sensationalized, opinion-based stuff versus intellectually factual stuff. More and more people are beginning to get their internet or their news off the internet, and that shouldn't surprise you. Obviously, y'all are an internet generation. The internet is far more efficient. It's far more expedient, which is both a good and bad thing, right? The internet has given rise to sort of more breaking news. But the internet has also given rise to some less than accurate breaking news. So it's a positive and a negative. When you look at it over sort of the lifespan of the internet, which is the last 3 decades, media has obviously changed, right? The media, the internet is going up. Fewer and fewer people get news. Anybody here still get a newspaper delivered to their house every day? Every day?
My grandpa.
See, that's surprising. I mean, just because this class is so small for 2 of you, like usually it's like 1 in a class of 30. Because most people don't get newspapers delivered anymore. One, because internet newspapers, right, like online publications can be updated instantaneously, right? Whereas, and we live in sort of this instantaneous society where we want to know things immediately. Newspapers are always hours and hours and hours out of date, right? And so there's a lot of people that don't like newspapers anymore for that issue. You do need to understand that there's a significant issue in regards to media today when it comes to like technology and media companies. Because there's a couple of issues with it. One, there's an issue over censorship, and then 2, there's an issue over sort of how technological companies are data mining and then providing that information to media. Conglomerates is just another name for the monopolies. Right? When we talk about traditional media, that's print media. I do need you to understand that traditional print media also includes like books. Books are traditional print media. Because, you know, Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, for instance, which you probably learned about in U.S. history, like that still classifies as media. It was still about exposing the meatpacking industry and its problems. Okay. Newspaper circulation is down, but there are people that a lot of newspapers are moving to digital, so they're not all of them are going bankrupt or completely obsolete. This is a matter of ad revenue, and so obviously ad revenue is down significantly amongst print media because again we don't print, like we don't pick up things, we do things digitally these days. Broadcast media, this is anything that's broadcast, meaning it has radio waves or television waves. Like broadcast is anything that's done through some sort of like radio wave signal. Okay, so radio and television. Obviously, television is more prominent than radio. As technological advances have happened, that's not a surprise. There are actually fewer people reverting to television now as well, though. Again, the internet is going to take over TV. TV is also changed in and of itself, right? So you used to have like way back when you go back to the 1950s and sort of the advent of television. Anybody know how many channels there were? 4.
Oh!
Right? Yeah, Caleb, I bet you know 3 of them, right?
The news?
No, what is the channels?
Oh, I have no idea.
ABC,
Oh, NBC,
NBC,
and then Fox.
CBS,
That one.
And TBS.
And then your local
No,
news.
CNN?
PBS.
What is that? Oh, for kids?
PBS is the public broadcasting station.
PBS.
It's controlled by the government, right? The other 3 were companies, corporations, right? The American Broadcasting Corporation, the National Broadcasting Corporation, and I don't remember what CBS stands for now off the top of my head. Those channels, and they still do, like they still show the nightly news, the evening news, you know, at 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock, depending on where you live. But starting in like 1980, we got CNN and sort of the 24-hour news cycle. And so local news has become less important. We tend to focus on national news. I mean, literally, like my dad in Arizona called me last night just to make sure I wasn't drinking the water here, right? Because he found out about the amoeba in the water supply. Y'all even know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. You know the water here is good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. But like, I mean, obviously it's not something that affects him in Arizona at all. And yet, because of how sort of news functions, here he is calling me up to make sure that I'm not drinking the water, because like those types of amoebas are gnarly and can do a lot of damage. And y'all have to take those seriously. Radio was obviously far more significant in like the 20s and 30s. But there was a resurgence of talk radio in the 90s on AM stations, and it really actually helps with sort of the Republican aspect. So a lot of like broadcast news seemed to be very liberally bent, and so radio news seemed to be more conservatively bent. Believe it or not, radio is still seeing an increase because podcasts and things of that nature are essentially radio over the internet. And obviously podcasts are fairly prominent anymore in this day and age. This is a generational divide. You can sort of look over this on your own. But obviously you see like young people and old people are doing things very differently. Not that that should surprise you. News and comedy have begun to, yeah, in fact, there's actually a term for it now called infotainment. And so the Daily Show with Jon Stewart was a really good example of an early aspect of that. I mean, Jon Stewart did cover actual news. He just covered it in a very satirical, comical way. I will probably have you watch some of. I think I might have I put up a John Oliver video yet for y'all?
Not that I know.
No, I will, especially when we get into civil rights and civil liberties, which is our next unit and my favorite unit, because John Oliver does a lot with that. But John Oliver is a comedian who has his own like, you know, weekly sort of like news comedy show. There are some issues with that because you do have younger viewers that don't necessarily understand sarcasm or hyperbole, and so they sometimes take these humorous things to be sort of factual. Like I can't count the number of times I have friends on social media that will post things from like The Onion or the Babylon Bee, and they'll be like, "Oh my God, I can't believe this is happening." Yeah, those aren't real. Like, y'all know what those are? Go look up The Onion or the Babylon Bee. The Onion is a satirical news source that literally every time there's a school shooting, they run the exact same article and just change the names of the school. right? And it's all this like, you know, sort of ridiculous mocking of how school shootings can't really be stopped because, you know, guns are a right that we have, yada, 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 right? The Babylon Bee is sort of a right-wing satirical thing. You know, so like CNN, for instance, keeps using the term mostly peaceful protests for these protests. Obviously, right-wingers don't see them as mostly peaceful. And so the Babylon Bee, you know, mostly peaceful crucifixion of Jesus, right? Like mostly peaceful concentration camps, right? Like they just started throwing in like mostly peaceful as a joke. A lot of people don't get that. Digital media has seen a significant impact in the change of how we gather information. And one, digital media has actually increased sort of the citizen journalist aspect. You know, so like you yourself might be a journalist. You might be somebody that's breaking news. Young people tend to rely heavily on it. But it has sort of both its good and its bad, right? So there are some advantages to it in terms of, again, accessibility and sort of the speed, but there are some negatives to online media as well, because obviously any of you can post anything, and it doesn't necessarily make it true, but if enough people repost it, then people start to believe like false information. But it is sort of interesting to me when you see sort of participatory democracy or participatory press, where you see citizen journalists that break stories before anybody else, right? So if you know anything about like football, Patrick Mahomes re-signed this summer. He signed a massive contract with Kansas City Chiefs, and that news was actually broke on Twitter by a clerk at a liquor store, right? Like a girl, like a 20-something-year-old girl that worked at a liquor store is the one who broke the news that the Chiefs were re-signing Pat Mahomes, all because a Chiefs executive walked in and bought like a whole bunch of champagne, and she asked, and he kind of gave her a nondescript, like a non-answer answer, and so she put two and two together, and she was like, I'm pretty sure that the Chiefs just re-signed Pat Mahomes, and that's about to become like big news. And then it did. Sometimes it's bad because you have people that, again, like I said, post things that are not accurate, right? Social media, again, it's good and bad. It does allow for sort of social discourse. The reality is that Facebook and Twitter and places like that are honestly sort of the new public square. That being said, then it gets into sort of some complex issues as to whether or not these public squares can censor information or limit access to information. It's a complex issue because limiting free speech is problematic, but there's also the issue as to whether or not they have like an obligation to ensure that only factual things are stated. Right, social media is sometimes referred to as the new dinner table because that's where people discuss political beliefs. It used to happen at the dinner table, it doesn't anymore. But it does allow for sort of more direct interaction. Obviously, Trump is very, very good at it. You know, say what you will about Trump, but him and his 50,000 tweets a day. I don't know how many times he tweets. The dude tweets a lot, though. Like, he really does. But it brings people closer to him, to his ideology, to his way of thinking, to his behaviors, his actions. And it furthers sort of political understanding and political discourse because it's so readily available and readily accessible. Okay? Digital journalism has given rise to sort of like niche journalism. So people that have sort of very specific purpose-driven goals, right? So you will see, and I don't think it's in this PowerPoint. I wish it was. I have a little image of a sort of political media of how media is skewed and biased and whatnot. But the increase in sort of audience targeted information is significant on the web. And what I mean by that is, you have publications now, Vox or the Huffington Post are some really good examples on the left. Like, they only post liberal stuff. They're just there for liberals. Like, if you are a conservative and you go read Vox or the Huffington Post, it will drive you crazy. Conversely, if you are a liberal and you read, I'm trying to think of right wing, OAN, which is the One American Network. I forget what OAN is a good example though. That is a very sort of right wing publication. I'm trying to remember the name of Glenn Beck's online publication now, and I can't. I'm drawing a blank. But those are geared toward conservatives and conservative ideologies and conservative viewpoints. Okay. Journalism is no longer professional in the sense that we can all be journalists now, because we can all break news and we can all participate and we can all share things. And you can start your own blog or your own podcast or your own whatever. And if you're entertaining enough and engaging enough, you might end up with a bunch of people that follow your podcast or your vlog or your blog or your whatever, without any regards to content or accuracy or anything like that. Nonprofit journalism does exist. These are sometimes referred to as think tanks. So they're basically organizations that exist not for profit, that are aimed at trying to help understand society and societal problems and how to combat different issues. A lot of universities have public outreach. A lot of universities have opportunities or means of trying to deal with or talk about or interact with, again, a variety of policy issues. Okay, again, some benefits, right? It's convenient. That's first and foremost. There's a depth of information online, although again, it is kind of sad that a large majority of Americans, they don't actually go into depth on anything. In fact, anymore, because there's so much information online, a significant percentage of Americans just read headlines and then they move on, which is problematic because headlines are clickbait and they're basically just aimed at trying to get a reaction out of you. So you can see all kinds of headlines that are wildly inaccurate. In fact, there have been instances in which I've read media, and you have like an article. You have a headline, right? And I read the headline and I'm like, oh my God, I need to know more about this. And then I read the article and the article has nothing to do with the headline, which is problematic. Online media provides more points of view, again, because everybody can sort of participate. But all of this also leads to an increase in misinformation. Sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally. Sometimes done out of malice, sometimes done out of naivete. It just depends. All right. Online media, there are some problems with online media in terms of the fact that when we get rid of sort of traditional journalism did do some things that online and sort of citizen journalism can't do. one of those, a substantial one of those, is that online journalism is less investigative because a lot of what we do online is very opinion based. It's very anecdotal. We don't have the background or the experience that like seasoned journalists do to go like investigate in depth. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff that's available via public information for as a result of the Freedom of Information Act. But we as just regular citizens don't know how to comb through that in order to get what we need. This can sometimes lead to lower quality, and it can lead to a more narrow lens, right? Meaning that only a small part of a picture is actually being shown. And that's more problematic when you have people that don't try to go and get their news from a variety of sort of sources. I try to read Vox and the Huffington Post as much as I try to read OAN and other right-wing sources, just because if you know what both extremes are saying, you can probably figure out what the actual middle is. Okay? Online media has given rise to fake news. Good Lord, there's all sorts of fake stuff that exists. It's not that hard, believe it or not, it really, really isn't that hard to figure out what is and isn't fake. You just have to be able to do it. Some other issues, we have a selection bias. Again, this is what I'm talking about. Like if you're conservative, you're watching Fox News. If you're liberal, you're watching CNN. Like you need to, you should try to engage with materials that go against your preconceived beliefs. Distrust of the media is actually growing, and it's grown even more in the last 4 years as a result of Donald Trump, because Trump refers to mainstream media as fake news. He's called the press the enemy of the people. That being said, you know, again, when you look at like a CNN fake news, interestingly enough, it's a complex question. Like it's not a simple yes or no. Because if you go watch the Cuomo show or Don Lemon or whatever the name of his show is, like those guys aren't telling you the news. Like it's actually kind of sad. The reality is the way news used to function is you would have this really old dude from like Nebraska. And I'm not joking when I say Nebraska, because apparently Nebraska is like the one place in the United States that doesn't have an accent, right? But you would have this like, sort of like pristine looking old white dude sitting behind a desk in a really nice suit, and he would sit there in a monotone voice. It was very soothing and comforting. And he would tell you what happened today. And that's all he would do. He would give a rundown of the day's events. He offered no opinions about those events. He made no commentary. He simply told you, today, Donald Trump signed this bill into law. Tomorrow, Donald Trump will depart on an Asian tour where he will meet first in Japan with the Prime Minister. From Japan, he will travel to South Korea, right? But no, oh, he's going to go there and he's going to rile things up with the North Koreans. Like, that's an opinion, and you're speculating. That didn't used to happen with our media. And it would be kind of nice if it did again, but instead, a lot of our media today is really sort of like political commentary, talking head type people, right? That are not providing you with factual information. Media influencing public opinion. That you do need to understand this. Media can influence public opinion, and it can do it in a variety of ways. So it can help set the agenda, which just means that by the media constantly talking about something over and over and over again, it can make you think that the issue is important. It doesn't necessarily change your opinion, but it can sort of set the national conversation. The media does try to frame things, which does try to influence you. And then priming is the idea of trying to sort of manipulate your evaluation of stuff. This is the real issue. Framing and priming are not as prevalent anymore because there's so many different options for us to watch in terms of the media that we're frequently only watching things that already align to what we believe in. Again, so agenda setting is the most powerful thing here. Identifying which issues we need to talk about, bringing issues to light, getting them addressed. Politicians talk about issues that receive a lot of news coverage because that's what's on people's minds. They don't talk about things that are not talked about. And I mean, here, just to give you an example, I mean, look at Black Lives Matter and look at social unrest in the United States. Do you think that there was not social unrest 20 years ago? Like, is this a new concept? Like, are we just now figuring out that blacks have been discriminated against? No. We've known this for a long time. But the media didn't talk about it, and so it wasn't that big an issue. Now the media talks about it. Now anytime you turn on any media, all you see are these protests. And so it's a bigger issue. That's that idea of agenda setting, right? Again, if all the media talks about is Clinton and her emails, right? That's that idea. Selection bias is this selection bias is sort of a psychological concept, but you're just you're prone to go after things that correlate to what you already believe. This is why I don't think media really changes your opinion. If you are staunchly conservative, you are ingesting media that is staunchly conservative. If you are staunchly liberal, you are ingesting media that is staunchly liberal. I don't think framing and priming are nearly as important. But so this is framing is trying to influence how you see things. Again, we talked about this a little bit with the polling assignment, the polling concept. The way you verbalize things, the way you say things can impact it. Believe it or not, like, word choice matters, right? And if you don't believe that, like, go watch the Jimmy Kimmel show sometime. Like, Jimmy Kimmel loved to do this, although he's not the only one. How many of you like Obamacare? You think Obamacare was a good thing? Anybody in here? Nobody likes Obamacare? Anybody in here like the Affordable Care Act? Y'all know that they're the same thing? Most Americans don't know they're the same thing. In fact, when you go out on the street and you ask people, like go to like a Republican town and be like, how do you feel about Obamacare? Man, I hate it. That Obama, he's terrible. Right? But then you're like, how do you feel about the Affordable Care Act? Man, it was great. That's how I got my insurance. Yeah, it's the same thing, bro. Like, one just had Obama's name on it, so you hate it. Okay? Priming, calling some issues while calling some matters to issue. Calling attention to some matters while ignoring others, right? So that's the idea. So, again, when you look at like Donald Trump, some of his history, you'll see it now. I think the liberals will try to make a big deal out of Donald Trump and his tax returns, right? If y'all didn't pay attention, you didn't know. Somebody leaked Donald Trump's tax returns, and basically, for 10 of the 15 years before becoming president, Donald paid no taxes, no income taxes. Right? Does that surprise any of you? It shouldn't. Right? Are any of you mad at Donald Trump for that? In reality, you shouldn't be. Because here's the deal, dude. If I told you that it cost $100 to take this class and get college credit, but I also told you that if you filled out form 195-C and you signed on the following lines, and then you hopped backwards 10 times, that the fee would be waived, would you do all of those things to save your $100?
Yeah.
Of course you would. Donald Trump took advantage of tax code that exists. He did nothing illegal. The government created ways for him to not pay taxes. So guess what he did? He didn't pay taxes. Believe me, if I could figure out how to not pay taxes, if I was rich enough to have a tax attorney that could look for all of my loopholes for me, I wouldn't pay taxes either. Media leaks, and we do have whistleblowers. This is sort of relatively important, especially in today's society. Whistleblowers are people that leak information to media. Edward Snowden is a really good example, and we'll talk about him in more detail in our next unit. WikiLeaks, this is an organization that publishes classified material. And so depending upon how you feel about classified material and the like, might be okay with it, might not. Just it depends on sort of your personal feelings about that. Yeah, okay. The Edward Snowden thing shouldn't be under WikiLeaks because he did not give it to WikiLeaks. Edward Snowden is not a part of WikiLeaks. That's a terrible job by this PowerPoint. Adversarial journalism is just the idea of basically creating an opinion and trying to use journalism and media as a means to get something accomplished, right? The Vietnam War is a really good example of this, showing sort of the travesty of the Vietnam War and the negative aspects of the Vietnam War. Got to that. The government does regulate media. No, I'm pretty much done, so we're going to just power through here. They do regulate media, and they're allowed to because the airwaves are public airwaves. See? And we're done. See, I told you, we're done.